Hello there. Welcome to the IWS podcast. I'm your host, RJ, and I have my favorite specialist guest today. I want you all to please welcome the lovely Paul and Sharon Bowers. How are you all doing today?
Very
I'm
good.
doing great.
So listen, this is a very, very special episode to me. These are two very incredibly special people that have impacted my life in so many ways that you all don't even know. And I'm hoping to get into some of that with you all today, so hopefully you all can take a lot away from this discussion. The focus is going to be talking about relationships and marriage, because these two lovely people have been together for quite some time. And so I want to begin like I traditionally do on this platform, being mental health based and trying to help promote long-term relationships and healthy relationships. I'm going to start with you, Sharon. So can you talk with us a little bit about what your experiences were like growing up with your family?
Sure. I had a really nice family. I had a very great childhood. My parents were super supportive, very loving. They weren't terribly outgoing. We were as children sort of isolated as a foursome. There was my sister and our parents. We were very close to grandparents. My parents supported me and my sister in every way. They were always supportive of things we wanted to do. So it was a good childhood, and I saw them in a very good relationship. They were very loving to each other and very committed. So, that's kind of.
How about you, Dad? How would you describe your family and your experience growing up with them?
I grew up in a family of 5. My parents, when they got married, Dad went into the Navy and was an ensign, stayed in there during World War II. And after they got out, they wanted to help society because back then children were not being adopted. So both my sister and my brother were adopted, and they wanted to have a natural child. And I came along. I was the third one of the family. I was actually supposed to have a younger brother or sister, but my mom lost it, and it hit her very hard. But they were always loving, supporting. They were in a long-term marriage themselves until my mom died in 91. Things that I wanted to do, whether it was football, my mom didn't want it, but my dad allowed it because the doctor said, Paul, you have a kind of a longer neck and you might get a neck injury, but Dad goes, if he wants to play football, let him play football. Mm-hmm. And so that and Boy Scouts, and they supported me in school and then going off to college. It was like, I saw my dad was a mechanical engineer or electrical engineer. And my mom worked a little bit when they first got married, but she stayed home, much like Sharon's mother did, and helped raise the family. So that Mom was always there, helping when you skinned your knee or fell down on the bicycle when you were learning to ride.
Yeah.
Very, very supportive and loving. And it was a great experience growing up, and that love just kind of flows to this day. And then my grandparents too, especially my grandpa, Julian Morty Bowers Sr.
That's beautiful. And I think and I appreciate you guys for sharing that. I think it's really important to understand and kind of frame why it's so important how we come up and who we're around. Because for a lot of people, obviously, for those that don't know, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. And a lot of my experience, both personally and professionally, has been working with people who have experienced a lot of different challenges throughout life, particularly in their earlier years. And I always find it interesting when you see and you get to know a person, a lot of the things that they've gone through, how greatly that can affect the trajectory of their life. So sometimes when they may have backgrounds like you all's, which I think is beautiful, it makes sense to me how you can end up coming to a space and a place where you find yourselves into a beautiful relationship that maybe mirrors and is similar in scope to your parents. But when you don't have those things, I notice it can be particularly more challenging, right? Because you don't necessarily have the best examples. So you're trying to figure out, what is it that makes me happy? What do I get fulfilled in? Where do my sense of morality, my norms, my traditions, all these things. When you don't have those examples, you kind of have to cultivate it from scratch. And it can be quite difficult, when you don't have those things. But it's great that you all did, because I think that's a huge precursor to why you found yourself, that's my speculation, that you found yourself in the situation that you all in and had the type of relationship that you've had. Which, by the way, for myself and the audience, just to restate, how long have you two been married?
44 years.
44 years if you guys didn't hear them. So we're talking over 4 decades. That is an incredible amount of longevity that I think does not happen easily. Is that a fair statement?
That's very fair.
Well, and
It's
got to remember too, we were together for 5 years, making sure that before we got married too, that we were both compatible and we were heading in the right direction.
Right. So when we add those together, we're actually talking about 50, if you want to include dating, which I would say is a very obviously fundamental part of courtship, and even determine if you want to be with somebody long term or not. So, okay. So I'm going to come to you now. I want to ask you, because we kind of touched on it a little bit before we started, how did you find and meet her? And then even to elaborate on that a little bit further, why did you want to pursue her?
It was in an English class in January 1975, and it was English 201, and she was attractive, and I actually wanted to go study with her, which we did. I don't know how much you can do in English and study together. But,
Sure.
But I wanted to pursue that, and I actually we ended up going out on our first date. And then that summer, I ended up going down to Columbus, Indiana from Fort Wayne, Indiana to go stay at their house. So it's like I made sure that I wanted to enhance and improve that relationship.
Sure.
Just meeting, because then it was a spring quarter, and as soon as the quarter was over, summer break.
Yeah.
I didn't want to let her go. It's just something in my heart knew.
Okay. How about you?
Yeah, so it was my freshman year in college, and I had a couple of different relationships there at the university, but nothing serious. And then I met him, and I wasn't quite sure right at the beginning, but we kept seeing each other, and he surprised me when he showed up at my home down in southern Indiana, because
after writing letters back and forth.
And he was writing me, and I wrote him back, but he had moved to some other rental home for just the summer, so he never received my letters.
Oh.
So then all of a sudden he just showed up at my door, and it was a bit of a surprise, but it was a nice surprise, and we had a good time, and my parents really liked him from the get-go. So
I mean, I have to imagine that has to be, especially I would say nowadays, to me, you must have been a go-getter, because something about you, if you knew that you were writing correspondence and you weren't getting any back, and then you felt like, you know what, I got to make sure this person knows I really like you. So to go to the length of, I'm going to go to your parents' house, I'm going to meet them, which I know for a lot of guys can be quite scary. Still, like, what drew you to want to do that? Especially knowing now that I know that you weren't getting the letters.
That's just something I knew in my heart. I can't explain it.
He drove 3.5 hours from Fort Wayne to Columbus on a whim.
Just, was it kind of like I forget the name of that movie. Is it like that movie where the guy puts the boombox outside the window and trying to like get the girl's attention? I forgot what movie that was.
Yeah, I don't know.
Was it one of those, or was he just, I knocked at the door?
He just came and knocked at the door.
Okay.
Yep.
He's like, hey, I'm Sharon's boyfriend, or
I'm here to see Sharon.
I'm a friend from college, sir, ma'am.
I'm
May
here
I
to see
speak with
Sharon
her?
Krebs.
Don't tell me.
Okay. No, that's really interesting. So started at school, kind of like again, so you both had different perspectives on it. You clearly sound like you felt a little more emotionally enticed to want to talk to her more. You were figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
You left. You didn't want to let it go, especially after writing and not hearing it back. And you were like, I got to get her. Right.
Well, and then we went out and had dinner.
Yep.
Before we broke for the summer too, and
Okay.
Mhm.
went to a movie.
Yep. So then, the next year, I was still in a dorm and he was in an apartment, and then things just clicked, and we've had a great time.
A good run so far.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious now. I'm thinking while you were making that point. So because this might be a product of times, right? When did you guys have that conversation? Like, are we going steady? Are we getting serious? Are you going to be my girlfriend? When does that happen, or did that happen?
I don't really think it ever really was a discussion. It just happened.
It just happened.
It
Just
just
like,
happened, and
I see you every day, and
yes,
Yeah, and
we're just going to keep
and-
doing this.
Yeah.
And then it
Yes.
even got to the point where, as she was getting into the nursing program, she got delayed
Yeah.
a little bit, and because they only accepted so many nurses into the program, so being the first college-educated person in the family, I know there was a time where she said, "Hey, let's get married and go move into married student housing," and I'm like, "No, I am not going to take the chance of maybe you getting pregnant and not finishing school." And her parents helped her get loans to get through college, and I basically promised her at that point. I said, "You finish school, we'll get married." And so
Yeah.
she graduated on a Saturday, and we got married the next Saturday.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was
But I mean, and I had no intention of not finishing. I
Sure.
was carrying all these student loans, but I
Yeah,
just thought it would be
Lord-
fun.
Lord knows we know.
But it's like
Yes.
I
I know how
didn't,
that
I didn't
feels.
want to have to,
Yeah.
take that chance and deal with it, because her getting that nursing degree and education that her parents were fully behind her to get, I wasn't going to mess with it. It's like,
No, I respect that too. Even I want to ask you a quick question, just to clarify in terms of the time. So when you guys first met, up until graduation, and then you said you got married the week later, how much time had passed?
So that would have been
79, so we were talking a little over
4
almost
years.
4.5 years.
Okay.
and we were talking about kind of differences too. So when we got married, I entered the marriage with college loans, student loans. He did not.
Got it.
And he was, but it didn't affect him at all. He didn't mind, and in fact,
Yeah, we made
we-
sure that
we got those paid off
as quick as we
within
could.
a
Right.
couple of years.
we-
It was easier. It was easier then because some of the loans were like barely 2% interest. Some were zero.
And
some
some-
were forgiven.
Yeah, as long as she worked at the hospital.
So-
Oh, right.
And
Okay.
pediatrics.
Right.
then-
They incentivize you to work at certain places.
Yes.
To,
and
Yes.
that way some
So-
of it was forgiven. And,
But no,
Okay.
he was really great about not,
well, and that's what kind of when we
worrying about
after
all
we
this
got
student
married,
debt.
moved into an apartment, and then trying to save for our first house together and make sure the loans were paid off and have a yard for a dog to be in and for kids one day.
No, I think that's important. So when I want to move on to a slightly different question, but back to that time period, that 4.5 years where you guys were clearly in the relationship and trying to kind of figure things out. So since there wasn't the conversation of, are we in the relationship, I imagine you both were talking about what you both were looking for and what you wanted for the long term. Is that fair to say?
Well, we knew we wanted to be together for the rest of our lives.
Okay.
That was the goal. I think we both knew we would want children, but we didn't really talk specifics.
Like I want
At
5
all.
or 2 or
Right.
1.
Right,
Or,
not
Right.
at all. And then you may not know this either. We'd been married 7 years before Jonathan was born. So,
Okay.
For a lot of people, that's a long time in a marriage.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And,
I
but
mean,
we
figure
just
it's
we
over
I mean,
11
and there's
years from when we
there
first
was
met and started
there
dating
was
till we had our first child. It's like we did a lot of things that we wanted to do
I lived a
as
lot
a
of life.
couple,
yeah
and then said, "Okay, it's time."
yeah there was no really reason for delaying it. It was just we just recognized we weren't ready. It wasn't
I respect that.
what we wanted.
But we knew we wanted children.
Right, but didn't have necessarily a specific time in mind.
Nope.
The reason why I ask, let me provide a little context, because again, I know that there's a little bit of a generational divide. So a lot of the things that I listen to and that I kind of pay attention to now, and especially a lot of my clients that I talk to as well, I think there's been a shift in terms of not just relationship formation, but also priorities. So for a lot of young men and women, I hear a lot about focusing on career. And what I notice at the same time is there's sort of a consequence naturally that relationship formation then is not the priority. So then we're kind of not thinking about it, out of sight, out of mind. And maybe I'm sort of in my early to mid 30s, and now I kind of have this epiphany. I want to get married. I want to have a child. And I say that specifically more towards women, because one thing I've realized is that men, we don't think about that as much. Not that no man does, but we typically don't, because we don't have biological pressure to reproduce, whereas women do. And so I ask that question because I know for a lot of women and men right now, the question is kind of like, when should I do it? And because there seems to be this abundance of go work, get your education, make your money, there almost becomes like a panic. Again, like I'm 33, I'm 34, maybe if I'm a young woman, and like I need to do it.
Time's getting short.
Right, because it's going to get harder. We know. I know you know better.
The risks
than I
go
do.
up.
The older that you get. So I'm trying to like learn how to navigate that conversation with folks, because I feel like not enough people are talking about, while I think it, and I commend going out and seeking out your career and doing well for yourself. If you know family building is important to you, it may not be the top priority right now at 21, 22, 23, but you know it's important, right? To at least try to balance that level of focus and attention to also, you know what, let me seek somebody out that I may want to build with. But if I'm only thinking about my job, I'm kind of putting that out of my mind. So when am I going to imaginarily meet this person to even have the time that you two did, the 4 years, to figure that out, right? So imagine I meet somebody at 34. I'm probably not going to want to wait 4 years. I'm going to be like, hey, next year, maybe 2 years, and like, but then you may not have the opportunity to really vet that person, make sure they want the same things that you want the same things that they want. So just kind of touching on the time.
And it's good to work on the relationship before the children come along.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it's hard. And I'll add another thing about how our backgrounds were different. When we first got married, it was hard because when issues did come up, Paul knew how to talk things through. I didn't really know how to do that. I would just, if I was upset about something, I would just clam up and go to another room and slam the door. And he was really good about helping me basically learn how to fight.
Or communicate.
Not that we were fighting, but it was, you have to know how to,
you got to talk
fight
through
fair.
those things.
You have to fight fair, and you have to communicate.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot of practice learning how to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
When you never have. And
never needed
that's a
to.
really important thing to think about when you're in a serious relationship that you would like
you're
to
around
have
somebody 24 hours a day,
long-term.
Yes,
7
sir.
days a week,
long-term.
year after year. It's like, come on, we got to talk.
I know. No, okay.
Good things and bad things.
I need to point out a distinction here. And I love that you said that. In my experience, and it's very interesting that you said it that way, it's usually flipped. Most of the people that I talk to, particularly the clients that I work with, are men. And I want to make a point, because I always make this point. Most men don't know how to communicate how they feel, because most men historically have never been taught that it was appropriate to talk about how they feel, because most of us come from backgrounds and environments in society where it's not promoted. However, for women, it's almost always okay. And I don't say that to begrudge women. I say that because I'm always trying to advocate for men on that behalf. Don't get so frustrated or upset with them to think that they don't want to discuss it. It's like if you make anybody do something they've never learned how to do, you naturally would run from that. You would avert and try to evade it because you're terrified, right? That's how most men are. But what's interesting, bringing it back to you two, is that you said it was flipped. That he was the one that wanted to engage in those discussions and you hadn't learned how to do that. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So I'm very appreciative of how patient he was.
Yeah.
And it of course changed me and
Oh, and then so many things that we did together after when we started dating, and whether it's camping or travels, or a lot of things that she had never had a chance to experience because her parents were always very focused on going to the same place almost every vacation. and there's more out there than that.
Sure.
You know, there are some places that are nice to revisit, but it's like there are so many places in this beautiful country to go. And I love the outdoors because growing up, and yes, in Boy Scouts we slept on snow. Not that we've ever done that. We've gone backpacking in Hoosier National Forest and out in the Rockies. And we had some great experiences before children came along.
And I know we're kind of touching on that. I'm trying to stave off that part of the conversation only because I know that that's a big one when we start talking about family building. But going back to you guys and how you decided ultimately to choose each other, I think this is important because it seems like for you two, you more or less realized very early on that you wanted to work it out and be with each other.
Yes.
Is there any, and I know you said you didn't really talk about, was there anything specific you knew that you were either trying to observe or you were trying to hear from the other that helped you come to that realization that this is the person for me? Like, how did you come to that conclusion on your own? Because I'm just curious in my mind, like, did it just passively happen? We just kept spending every day together and conversations happened, or just kind of help illustrate that for me a little bit better? Whoever wants to take that.
I think we're both looking at each other because in my mind it just passively happened.
It more happened on its own just from the years of being together and knowing full well I'm going to be getting done with my undergraduate in accounting and I'm going to be sticking around while she's finishing nursing to work on my master's.
And just sharing experiences, sharing the stress of being at the university and
going to the library and studying together.
And managing to try to eat, and I was struggling financially and
and she was in tears in some of the classes that she had in the nursing program because she was like, I can't get this right. I can't get this. Yes, you can.
So
I'm
he
the
was my main
motivator
cheerleader
behind her, and drag her to the library and make sure that she got the study time and quiet time to go over it, and put your mind to it. That you can do it, and I was the cheerleader.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's support. It's about supporting each other,
and that's part of the marriage too, is supporting one another and all that we do.
Absolutely. Okay. The reason why I was asking for clarification is so for me to kind of give you guys a peek behind the curtain. A lot of the issues that I find clinically break down to communication or lack of communication. And most issues I'm dealing with, like, people come in for different things, but if you kind of distill it down, that's usually what it comes down to.
Yes.
Particularly if it has to do with another person, like their kid, their parent, their partner. And so the reason why I ask these things is because I'm very big on trying to help people understand, like, to advocate for what you want, but be clear about what you want. So for example, if you are dating and trying to date with intention, state that you are, state what you're looking for, which means you need to have done the work and reflected on what you want in order to be able to articulate and express that to another person. So they can understand, this guy is looking for this. This woman is looking for this. Does that align with what I want for myself in my future? So that hopefully, as we continue to engage with each other, we know very quickly, are we compatible or not? Not just physically, because that's the easiest one to figure out, like, you're attractive. Beyond that, the stuff that helps people stay together. Do we want, I use the term, like, once you're in a relationship, a shared family vision, where I know, for example, and we'll get to it in a moment, I want X amount of children. I would like around the same. I would like to be the primary person working. I would like to be the primary person taking care of the children, or we want to have split roles and split responsibility, right? I say all that because a lot of the stuff that I see is like the reactive nature of, we already got in the relationship, we already got in the marriage, now we're trying to figure things out. But a lot of it probably could have been avoided had we discussed a lot of these things ahead of time. You follow what I mean? So I think it's beautiful for you two that these conversations over those 4 years and some change, it just kind of happened, right? The reason why I'm asking you in this intentional way is because I find that a lot of people, it doesn't naturally happen. Number one, I think it's because it's happening too quickly. And then number two, I think it's that people aren't fully aware of what they want, so then they naturally don't speak about it. So this idea of, again, intentional dating, intentional courtship is something I'm trying to promote more of, so that people know that the person that they're dealing with is somebody that they could actually have a greater potential to last a long-term relationship, just like you two have. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that compared to what you all experienced in you two coming together? How does that compare for you?
I mean, I think when we first got together, we weren't thinking of those types of questions, longevity and where are we going to be 5 years from now? It was more of, we're in the moment, let's share time together, let's have fun together, let's do things together. And would that have helped earlier? I mean, obviously we discussed getting married before we graduated, so I mean, we already were kind of having that conversation, but we didn't do it up front.
Right.
And I would think at 19 years old, maybe that's a little bit too early to be thinking of that.
Sure.
It may be different if I was, 23 or 24 and just starting out. But back then, you're new at college. What is college? You're not at home. Your parents aren't there. Mm-hmm. You can, be wild or not wild. You can go to class, not go to class. It's like it's a completely different environment. And you're learning as you go.
Right. Remind me of one more question. When you two did get married, how old were you?
I was 23.
I was 24.
Okay. The reason why I asked, okay, let me build on that now. Let me ask you this question. Do you think at that time,
I was 23.
While you guys were, let's say at 23, do you feel like you had a pretty good sense of who you were at that time? As an individual?
I was getting there, but I wouldn't say that I was all the way there.
Okay.
Because at the time that, I sat for the CPA exam the first week of May, had my birthday. We got married 2.5 weeks later.
Just happening.
And it's like we both started our jobs. After our honeymoon, it's like first apartment. It's like that month was crazy. And it's like, okay, you've worked all these hours and years at college to get your degree, and now you're ready to go put it to work, but you haven't done that yet. So you're about to take new steps. Absolutely. And it was a wonderful experience, and it was hard.
Agreed.
And she made more money than I did getting started.
No, and I like that you phrased it that way. The reason why I asked you the question is because it's been my personal experience. I feel like you need, not that this means you shouldn't get married earlier, but this is just my impression. I think you need about your 20s to figure out who you are. And I think after that period, you start to figure out how you take the level of intention to create purpose and meaning in life to then go execute it. That's my opinion. You guys don't have to agree with that. But that's why I asked you, like, did you feel like you knew yourself? Because if I fast forwarded you to like 2023, so today's time, a lot of people would say that's too young. They're like, 23, that's ridiculous. Why would you get married at 20? You don't know anything. Yeah. And so it's interesting to hear you say, like, yeah, we still didn't know, but we felt confident enough clearly that we still wanted to take that chance on each other.
Well, and back in my high school, there were many of my friends that had gotten married at 18 and 19.
Right after high school
graduation.
Right after
high school, and some of them they went to college, finished, some didn't. And it's like, we were late.
Right.
Back
Which is
then.
interesting, right? Even to say it, and that to me, that's definitely generational, because that's something you would say, like, again, now people would say, oh, that's too early. Like you saying 18 is early. They're like 25 is early, 27 is early. Like now I think it's kind of shifted to early 30s. It's like what seems reasonable. But again, the point about knowing who you are, I've made that point because I think it is possible to make a relationship work even while you're still figuring yourself out, because both parties are doing that, right? But I think both parties have to be willing to allow the person to grow and evolve, meaning the person you met is not necessarily who you're going to still be with, because I'm my own independent person. I'm going to continue to grow as an individual, right? And figure out who I am and what I want. And you will as well. And we must give each other space to do that. Not like, well, I met you this way, so you got to stay that way. Did that ever come up for you all? Or you're like, no, we're just letting it flow the way it does?
Well, I definitely feel like we both grew a lot after we were married. We're still growing.
Sure.
And I really respect Paul for the way, I mean, there are different things that I do, and he lets me be me. And I hope that he feels the same. Because we aren't the same people we were back in 1979.
Just a few years later.
We both have grown in many different ways, but we're fortunate that we were able to and willing to support each other in that growth. And
agreed.
In the things that we wanted to do individually and as a couple.
And as one.
I need to say that again. Wait, actually, no, I need you to say that again. Say that last part you just said again.
That we both grew. We've grown over these years, both individually and as a couple.
Right. The reason why I asked you to repeat that is because, let me give you a take that I always say. My sort of hierarchy of like how you prioritize your needs. I tell people, including myself, that it starts with you. You are the top priority. You should be the top priority in your life so that you can be well, so that you can be the best version of yourself. Then it goes to your partner in your relationship, because the way I am, I compose 50% of that relationship. So if I'm not well, my relationship will naturally suffer because, who I am. And then if you have children, they will suffer if the family's not well, because the relationship is the stability for the family and the children, right? So when you said that, that's why I wanted you to repeat that, because I think a lot of times, and I work a lot with parents too, and also parents that co-parent that aren't in a relationship. I think a lot of times we get caught up in this idea, we kind of over-identify with a role and we minimize or neglect the other ones. So we may say, for example, I've worked with like some moms who are really happy and proud to be mothers, which is beautiful, right? But then they may neglect their partner, or they may neglect themselves. And I'm like, listen, you have to matter the most to you. And the reason why is because nobody knows what you think and feel better than you. I don't care how long you've been together. You can never read the other person's mind. You still need them to communicate with you about what's going on, right? So when I think about how people come together and how they kind of figure out who they are and what they want from one another, I'm like, you need to be the top priority, always. And I don't think anybody needs to apologize for that. But I think sometimes we get caught up in this idea of like sacrifice. Like, I'm such a good person because I'll sacrifice for my partner. I sacrifice for my children. And I'm like, and I don't know, you guys have obviously had children longer than me, but in my mind, I think, listen, my child is an important aspect of who I am. They are not all of who I am, because I was here before they came here, and they're not always going to be here because they grow up and then they go live their own lives. So back to me. So then what do I do? Does my life stop because my children don't live with me anymore? I would hopefully say, of course not. So anyway, I love that you said that. And I love that you made that point, because to me, we cannot lose ourselves just because we get in a relationship or neglect ourselves, because I think the relationships will suffer over time.
I feel like, to add to that we have always practiced that even though we're in this home, we have children, we have a lot of friends, we have family, but in this home, our marriage, our relationship, our partnership is the most important relationship in the household.
That we nurture that
And
relationship.
It does need to be nurtured, and it does need to be fed, and it needs to be worked on.
Yes, ma'am.
At all times, and taking time for just the relationship is really important, to take a break
if you have
from
children.
Right.
the children and all the household duties and all the work, and
Get yourself a babysitter and get out and have good quiet time for the couple.
You need date nights.
you do, and sometimes the
May
date
not be.
night may have ended up just like around Christmas. We would have a date night to go out and shop shop for Christmas and have dinner, but we looked forward to that every year, and it's always one of our important priorities. We always celebrate our anniversaries.
Right.
I think I was telling you about that
Right.
every year. Yeah.
No, I agree, and that's what I mean. I think
We're in
For
the
the-
planning phase for next year's 45th
Good.
wedding anniversary.
yeah,
What are we going to do?
that's a big one. No,
Yeah.
but okay, let me make another point, because you guys are clearly doing it. So I just want to put some context around it. So to me, the way I would interpret what you just shared is that you two continue to select and choose each other and choose the relationship, right? Because
Absolutely.
like I said earlier, we don't just get together and then it just magically keeps working, right? If we don't keep actively working on ourselves and on the relationship, eventually it will degrade over time. Is that fair for me to say?
Yes.
And again,
Absolutely.
I'm deferring to you all because you all are the experts to me. But I make that point because when I think about the experience and the time that you put in, the fact that you can tell me after 44 years that you're like, we still want to make these times to have these dates and we still want to celebrate all of these big events in our life, right? To me, that shows me, even if you didn't tell me, even if we weren't having this conversation, you two have consciously made that decision to keep choosing each other,
Yes.
right? Because your actions show it. You follow what I mean?
Right. Oh, yes. Yes.
I think we lose sight of that. I think sometimes, and again, people who have been in relationships way less than you two feel like your partner should just get it. It should be easy. I shouldn't have to keep working at it. I know you enough. You know me enough. Why do I need to tell you these things? Why do I need to acknowledge how you feel, validate how you feel, make you feel special sometimes?
Yeah, telling your spouse that you love them every day. You don't feel like you have to do it. It's
Right.
I want to do it. I want to snuggle up and
Right. First thing in the morning is a hug.
Right.
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah, so-
absolutely
Yeah.
nurture that relationship.
Right. And that was my point. I think you two are a beautiful example of that. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that because again, these are things I hear other folks say, that it shouldn't be this hard. And in my mind, just because of what I've experienced growing up, I know life is brutal. I know it. I think, and I don't know it better than you two, but I know that things are always going to happen. So I've sort of understood, and I try to challenge myself and my clients and anybody who's listening to this, it's always about how you respond. Because you can't change what's going to happen to you, but you can absolutely change how you choose to deal with it. You know, whatever's being presented to you, whether it's losing somebody that you care about in whatever capacity, whether it's, you know, getting older and your children move on, and how do I process that? Or maybe it's having children for the first time. I have some new parents who are clients, and figuring out how to navigate that and how it impacts the relationship, because it used to just be us two, and now we're trying to not neglect each other because
really
the kid
hard.
takes all of the attention, right?
And they're exhausted.
Right.
And then you
mentally,
have-
physically, and emotionally.
And then as they get
Absolutely.
older, you're involved in sports and other
Yeah.
activities that you want to keep them focused and out of trouble, but also healthy and growing and doing what they want to do.
Right. No, I love that. I want to ask you all another question. It's going to be kind of a two-part question, but I talk a lot about expectations as well, in terms of, again, I know that you two kind of passively had these conversations, so you sort of knew what you were looking for, but just for yourself, just speaking for yourself, even before you met each other, did you have any idea what you felt you knew you needed from a person to want to take them seriously as a life partner? And some of that might have came from like growing up and what you saw. Like, I know I value great communication. Why? Because I saw it. I know I value love and attention and affection. Why? Because I saw it. Is there any of those things that you knew, like, I need this from somebody that I'm going to try to commit to for the rest of my life?
Well, I knew that I wanted stability.
Okay.
But I also knew that one of the things I was looking for were adventures too. I wanted to
And I saw
do things.
And I saw the light on her face as we were dating, and we did different things that she hadn't been exposed to, and how excited and happy she was. It's like, this is great.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
So-
This is the person I want to be with.
Mhm.
And it's just, you know, we grew together.
Mhm. What about you? What you were looking for?
That's
No, that's
Yeah,
it.
that's the same.
Okay.
You wanted somebody who was going to be adventurous and outgoing?
and loving and just enjoying that time being together. And I saw it as we dated.
I know Paul will want to talk about this some more too, but when I think about our success in our marriage, the one thing that we are fortunate to have, and when we came to Florida from Indiana, we got to spend time with his grandparents.
They were married
And
70 years.
We got to go and celebrate their 70th wedding anniversary. But even before that, we would go to family reunions and we would see them, and they were always just so sweet and loving. I mean, even after 60 years of marriage, you would see them
Holding
together
hands,
going to dinner, holding
holding
hands.
hands,
Yeah.
kissing, and
And I had never met them until we had moved to Florida, and I don't think you'd been around them for a while, but that just we'd leave the reunion and just talk about that. That's what I want.
yeah, and
Okay.
my
Just the
grandfather's
sweetness of it all.
Sure.
six brothers, and everybody would rotate and take care of,
Yeah.
coordinating the next year's
Yeah.
reunion.
And I have to add too, it's nice for people now to be physically near those kinds of people, not just see it on social media.
Sure.
Because
It's different.
pictures can really make things look very sweet too.
Oh, yeah.
But seeing it in person
I agree.
is
And playing
just
cards together
amazing.
or whatever
Yeah,
you're
just
doing,
seeing
talking.
the interactions.
Just-
Yeah.
It sounds like you're also saying, similar to what I was actually saying about you two in the beginning, that they were maybe another example for you two of what you desired for this relationship.
Hmm. Yeah.
See, so to me, and I like that you said that. So that syncs up exactly with what I said. I believe when you see it, it feels tangible, it feels real,
Mhm.
because now you believe that it is possible, right? Because it was your family, it was
Right.
your
Right.
new family.
Yeah.
You're like, well, if they can do it, maybe you might have said, I don't know, in your head, if they can do it, I want that. I want to do it.
And it doesn't have to be a family member either.
No.
It's just, it can be a friend, or it can be a neighbor, or it can be just somebody.
But it was
you
very
see on the street.
motivational. Julian and Nellie.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna segue for a moment because I want to give you all some flowers. When I said the power of examples, right? So why are we here today? Because you two are an example to me of what's possible, right? And for some of us, we don't always have that opportunity. Obviously, you guys know my story. For those that don't know, I lost my mom when I was 7. So it's not that maybe the example wouldn't have been there, but for whatever reason, it wasn't there.
Mhm.
So what do you do? And so I think about that like when you're an adult, right? So then when you're a child, obviously you are just subjected to whatever you have. You're just doing the best of what you can. But when you're an adult, then you have autonomy. Now you have the opportunity to say, like, how do I want to construct my life? How would I maybe like for it to look, right? Well, you all came at a very critical time right? For me, to be able to see something where, and I'm gonna give you guys my feedback, right? So just take it as you will. Never heard an argument. Never recall any type of coldness or disdain. I remember a lot of good communication. I remember a lot of coming together for meals together, spending time together as much as possible, while also still giving space for boys to be boys, but still always making the priority to come together, you know? And I think to me, that was one of the things that I started to understand, but I recognized more the older that I got was, and to be clear, because all you guys don't know, that was like less than 2 years, like total time of residing with you all, right? But that's how impactful that it was. And I'm telling you this because it's been 18 years since that's happened.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you so you know, you guys are a beautiful example of what I hope to be one day.
Oh, thank you.
And it's powerful because when you don't have that, like I said, it can be really difficult to understand how to have those discussions and how do you go about searching for what it is that you want and finding somebody who wants to give you also what you want. So when you have that example, to me, it is something that I truly hold dear, because I know, not just hypothetically because I watched it on a TV show, which some people do, I felt it. I was around it. It was in the atmosphere. And so I can always go back to those moments and say, like, no, you don't need to argue all the time. You don't need to yell. You don't need to scream. You don't need to be disrespectful. If it's predicated on love and respect, we're always going to conduct ourselves in a particular manner, right? Because we know why we're here. And when you set those examples, to me, now I'm talking as a parent. When you set those examples for the children, you're giving them a great sense of identity. So when they go out and try to seek out their own partners, they're trying to replicate that, right? When they have that, when they have the fortune, and I do mean fortune, of having that, they're trying to reproduce it. Because it's not like they're going to question, can I do it? I have mom and dad right here. They've been together for 44 years. Of course I can have 44 years if I want it, if I'm willing to work at it. And if I have questions, I can ask them. But when you don't, you got to work a little harder to try to find that for yourself, so that it maybe gives you that desire and that motivation, or maybe support, like you two have always been gracious about, to have those people in your corner.
Thank you. Well, before you go any further, I have to tell you that when you came into our lives, you were such a blessing to us. And we're so proud of all you achieved. More proud than you could possibly know, but you came here and really blessed our lives, a whole family.
It was hard.
It was hard.
I can imagine.
And you needed a kick in the rear end every once in a while.
Sure.
Help you out, point you in the right direction,
as good fathers do.
But it's like it couldn't be more proud.
Yep.
I appreciate that. That's why I wanted to make sure that I took the opportunity to talk about this, because I think that for so many people, and I work with some of those young guys too, and I have a lot of empathy for them, because I know what it's like when maybe you don't have those examples, but if you could give it to them, they would be so happy to have those type of folks in their life. So where's like the middle ground? How can we help like incentivize people to know, if I don't have these things, go seek them out? Because there's a lot of things on this platform is about seeking out assistance, seeking out help when you're going through difficult times. Because a lot of folks, I'm sure, that watch and listen to this don't come from the most stable of backgrounds, also do not have a level of comfort in speaking about how they feel. Like I said, a lot of this is focused on men. The vast majority of us are like, we don't talk about it. We just suffer through it.
Yeah, so if something's not going right, you got to talk. You got to talk.
Yeah.
You got to communicate.
Agreed. And that's something I spent a lot of energy into, but I'm very glad, and I didn't know that you were the you were sort of the instigator of communication, which I think is great, because it actually you are a demonstration that it's not always generational. It may have been, let's say, difficult for a lot of men back then to talk about these things, but clearly that didn't impact you. It didn't. Let me ask you like one quick follow-up though. Did any part of that come from like your parents in the house? Like, did they create that space for you guys to talk about things when you were, from what you recall growing up?
I mean, part of we always sat down and had dinner together, and we kind of continued that, especially like on a Sunday night, and had friends over of the boys and their even girlfriends, and that was always wonderful. But the focus at the table was talk about your day and how are you doing, and it was communication,
right?
And that happened every night. And then, yeah, I was the baby in the family, and there's a lot of times that, you know, I got left out on some things, but I'd see my sister, my brother, and mom and dad. It's just, I grew into that.
Yeah.
You got to talk.
Agreed. Again, that's something that I unfortunately I see a lot of the opposite. I'm glad that it happened, but to me, you're kind of like a case study of why it is important to do that when you're raising children. Again, because then they feel that it is normalized to them. So then it's not a question of should they do it, it is an expectation.
Yeah.
Like I would say for me right now, I know good communication is an expectation of any person that I'm talking to in any capacity in my life.
And sitting down and having dinner and discussions doesn't mean the TV's on,
right?
And everybody's focused on what's going on. It's like occasionally, yeah, if it's Super Bowl and you're having people over and you're eating, okay,
sports exceptions.
That's an unusual evening, but not day in and day out.
Right.
Turn that off. And I know it's hard in today's world
with the tech.
The techs, the iPhones, the iPads. Don't bring those to the table, please. But people, you got a question? Let's go look that up. Let's Google it. So technology has changed things a bit.
It has.
But you gotta focus on talking.
I agree.
Talking is healthy.
It is. And even what we were saying earlier, like, and I always try to impress this on people, like, no matter how long you're with somebody, or if you're a parent and your child, right? Because I've heard parents say this. I never heard you all say this, but I've heard parents say this, like, I know my child better than he or she knows themselves, right? Like, confidently say that. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Like, I understand you think you know a lot about them, and I don't discredit that idea. But you never know exactly how they feel and how they're thinking. You need them to express that to you, right? And to me, I use that as a different way of saying the same point, whether it's your partner, whether it's your kid, whether it's just somebody else that you value. You want to create the space for them to want to tell things to you, right? You want to be, that's why I was saying what I said about you two earlier, to be warm and inviting and feel like this is a more or less a conflict-free area. Why? Because it makes it easier to let those things out. If you're worried about your parents arguing, if you're worried about, do we have stability in the home? Do we have lights? Do we have power? Do we have food? If you're worried about people feeling safe, you're not going to talk. It's just a fact. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what family you're born into. You're not going to talk because you don't feel like it's appropriate maybe for you. But when you have all those elements like you two have done, I think it's absolutely possible. And then we get better outcomes for the next generation. Talking about your children and what I'm trying to replicate with my child. So always going back to that fundamental experience. And I think you gave the best example. If you saw it coming up with your parents, you knew what you wanted. So all you focused on was reproducing. Do you feel like that was, I know it wasn't the same for you because you didn't feel like you wanted to open up. Do you feel like any part of that had to do with the fact that were your parents open with you, or did they give you all the space to be open at all? From what you recall.
That's kind of a hard question. I mean, they didn't talk about a whole lot of things. So
they were very quiet.
They were very quiet.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And the only reason why I asked is because let me give an example. Let me put the example on me. So with my son, what I think about is when I know all the different challenges that young men have today, right? I I try even more directly to create that space for him. So, for example, working on emotional intelligence, helping teach vocabulary, like more words than mad, sad, bad, simplistic things. Let's get more into detail why, because then it helps us understand what's wrong so we can actually do something about it. If everything is very broad and general, like you can't really target anything, so then the kid just feels upset all the time. But I know it is my responsibility to create that environment for him. So what do I have to do? I need to demonstrate what I want to receive. I want him to be open, so what do I have to do as his father? I need to be open. Otherwise, why would he be open? He's like, my dad don't talk to me. Why do I talk to him? How do I know that? Because my father wasn't open with me. Like a lot of fathers are not. You being an exception, sir. So you see that and you're like, well, I can't replicate what I don't know. So if I feel like I'm in this oppressive environment where I'm not supposed to talk about things, then I naturally will not learn how to do that. So I had to learn how to do this through going through a lot of therapy myself to realize that it is okay. Exactly what you said. It is okay, it is appropriate, it is needed. So I work very hard to make sure he knows that and be more intentional. So I hope that kind of tied all that together.
Okay.
All right. So I want to go back to you guys in your relationship, but asking you a side question, because we've talked earlier about church. So first, what was your experience like maybe growing up? Because I find for a lot of us, that's why we even valued it in the first place. What was your experience like even going to church or having that type of relationship in that community?
We went to church almost every Sunday. There were times that my dad didn't, but my mom always took us kids and went to Sunday school. Learned a lot, didn't go to Sunday school all the time, but went to church probably 3 out of 4 weeks in a month. There's times when we missed or we're out of town or whatever, but that was important. And my mom thought it was much more important at times than my dad did. I bet he probably went with us maybe 25% of the time. He'd stay and work on things in the garage or projects, but it's like that was important.
Okay. How about you?
We were very occasional, very, very occasional, and mostly when I was young. And then I never went through to church in high school or college. But then when we were going to get married, we did go to the old church where my parents had gone occasionally way back, and the pastor would not marry us unless we met with him for counseling. I think it was three different sessions, 2 or 3.
Kind of like premarital counseling. Got it.
And it was very valuable. It was a good thing. We enjoyed it, and I think we took away a lot of good messages from it. And then we really didn't go to church as a couple until after the kids were older, and then we started again.
Okay.
So,
what about, didn't you mention earlier that you guys got married in that same church, or was it different?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Was it important for you to be married in that church?
Yes.
Why?
Everybody that I knew that had gotten married was always married in a church.
Yeah, for me that was just that was the tradition.
Got it.
It was
That was
very
the
rare
tradition.
Understood.
to not get married in a church.
Understood.
And
Yeah.
you did it in front of friends and family, and
Yeah. So it was very meaningful.
Sure. Okay.
it's like when you're making the pledge that basically through thick and thin and through sickness and in health until death
Yeah.
do you part.
Yeah.
That's a very solemn promise.
Yes,
and
sir.
very serious. Obviously, it's not to be taken into lightly when we make that decision. And we didn't take it lightly.
Right. Even at 23.
Yeah, even at 23. It's like we knew what we wanted.
Right.
We wanted each other.
Right. No, that's beautiful, and I appreciate you mentioning how that was kind of like during that time period that was very normal. Like that's what people did, and I still think it's
Yes.
normal now. It's just maybe it's not as prevalent as it used to be. But I just think it's important to touch on that because I know for some people, you know, their faith is quite important to them, and it is a foundation that helps guide them through whatever adversity and challenges that they face, whether it's as an individual or in your relationship. I think for those that hold those values and those that don't, even when you think about what you said, right? Like what you say in the vow. So let's say you're non-faith oriented,
Mhm.
but you still say those words, or you say something to that effect, right? What does that mean? We know you're going to have a certain level of adversity and challenges that are going to be thrown your way, and again, and I'm going to ask you all to clarify because obviously I've not taken those vows, so I don't know. Almost in any situation, regardless of what happens, you're not going to just throw in the towel. You're going to try your best to find a way to work through it together.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you all would add to that, or restate what I said?
I have a few little key phrases that kind of go along with that
Sure,
that
please.
I try to think about and I think are important. One is, like we were saying, to say I love you. I think it's great to be able to say I think you're the best. You did a good job. I'm sorry. Or the biggie is I was wrong. That's
you saved the two biggest ones to last.
yeah. The big one, the
Please
big
forgive
ones are
me.
nice. Please
Right.
forgive me. And I was wrong. And I think those things are really important.
And they're relevant in today's world.
Yes, sir.
Just like they were 100 years, 200, 1,000 years ago.
I can go off on
Where
a
are you
long
now,
tangent
where
on
are
this
you
one.
going to go with this?
I can go really far on that one. Talking about being apologetic, truly, or even just I think of that in context of accountability, meaning I'm going to say it this way too, because some people get this confused about control. They think about like in relationships, like you being able to control the other person, which is not true. I allow you or allow my partner to hold me accountable to do the things that I say I'm going to do because I value, I love, and I respect and appreciate them, and vice versa, right? And if not, you're allowed to confront me, not disrespectfully, but you're allowed to confront me and say, hey, we were going to do this, or I didn't like when you said this to me, or when you approached me this way, and to not get immediately defensive. Shut down, like you talked about earlier, because a lot of us do that. We call that emotional stonewalling in therapy speak.
There's people that hold grudges that don't let go. That's
Right.
Like, hello, let it roll off the back of your neck, your shoulders. It's like forgive and forget.
Forgiveness is hard.
It is.
But it's really important.
I agree. Even, and I try to always talk about things simplistically sometimes because I think sometimes we confuse ourselves. Like and again, you guys tell me if I'm wrong or if you disagree. When two people come together, because we are not the same person, we have two different perspectives and outlooks on life. That inherently makes it complicated. So if our communication is not strong, we will experience a wide variety of issues. Would you agree with me there?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So, but if I'm not only if I'm not willing to communicate, but then I'm not going to allow you to hold me accountable for the things that I say I'm going to do or what I'm trying to bring to the relationship, how can it last? Healthily. How can it healthily, not somebody, swallowing all the issues and pretending like, sweeping it under the rug, because I don't subscribe to that. But genuinely saying like, no, we're going to deal with those things. So we need to talk about those things and make sure we work through them together because we took these vows, because we respect and appreciate each other, because we want this to work for the long term. Would you agree with that? Just that notion, that idea?
Wholeheartedly, yes.
Okay. I say that because I think we forget that part and we feel like either the other person's supposed to 100% come to your side all the time, which is more like a dictatorship, and forget compromise, the C word, and then understanding again, because we're not the same, we don't need to inevitably always be in conflict, but sometimes you're going to concede on some things and other times I will. But that's relationships 101. That's my opinion.
Yes.
I would like to know what you two think about that.
That's kind of the only thing that has, not the only thing, the love too, but that's the main thing that has gotten us to where we are now, is compromising and listening to the other person's side of it, and then trying to meet halfway.
Right.
Meeting in the middle.
Would you agree?
Yes, I would.
So it's just one of those things that, like, when I talk to people and we have some of these discussions, it's just very interesting, because I feel like when they come into it and that's their worldview. Like, no, you need to come to me. And I'm like, that's not a relationship, or it's not a healthy one. If you think I'm always supposed to come to you, where does my voice get factored into this equation? When do my thoughts and my feelings, or when are they going to be appreciated? And not just, I'm going to steamroll you because I'm leading everything, so I don't really care what you think. Because you may not be using those words, but that might be the impression that you feel based on how they're kind of speaking to you or how they're approaching the type of discussion.
I think that's hard too for those families who have chosen to have one or the other of the partners stay home and take care of the home and the children and that
sure.
kind of thing. And
Sure.
so the person who's bringing in the paycheck feels that maybe their opinion counts for more, which
That's a good point.
is not
It's not true.
not true at all.
I agree.
Just totally inappropriate.
It is. Actually, I want to say, so thank you for saying that. You just reminded me of something I wanted to say. This is my take, but speaking to exactly what you said. When I was saying earlier about this idea of choosing career first, I know in my own family and also a lot of women that I've worked with, where the idea is be independent, don't rely on a man because he could leave you, he could economically devastate you, blah, 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 blah. Very fear-based talk is what I would call that. Now, I understand traditionally, and I do subscribe to it to a certain degree, men provide. I think we're built that way. We're sort of raised that way in a lot of cases. Not that we choose how we're raised. I think it just happens. I feel like I am that kind of person too. However, I'm not anti-women working and having their own sense of self, right? I think that's very important. Like we said earlier about having your own, I would just say identity outside of the relationship, not just I'm your wife, I'm your husband. But going back to the whole, what if one stays at home? And I actually have a client who's in the opposite situation. He wants to stay at home because his wife makes more money. And he used the term, what did he say? House spouse.
Yes.
Shout out to you for using that word. He said house spouse. Gender neutral. So I was thinking about that. To me, if I had the opportunity, this is my thought, I would love to have my wife be at home with our children. Not exclusively where she cannot have another role, but knowing that that person is present, because exactly what you said earlier about your mom, and just thinking about them being there and spending that time with you. Because not to say dad couldn't do that too, that's why I brought up my client. If you need to flip it, cool. But I don't think that's a bad thing to say if a person wants to be at home, that's somehow minimizing them or minimizing their impact on the family. I would make the case to what I feel like you were trying to say. It's extremely valuable, and it is equal in value for the fact that you're going to be home, because those of us that have raised children, you two clearly longer than I have, it's hard. So I have nothing but respect. And you doing that part allows me to do the other things that I'm doing, like go make the paycheck to bring home. But I think people get that confused and feel like, so that makes me better than you because I'm actually bringing in money, not valuing childcare, cost of childcare. And so they minimize the other person. So I think if we just took that part out of the equation, it could work, because then you would give that person equal say in decisions that the families are making. But I want to know what y'all think about it, because that's just my take.
Well, I just don't, I think the whole term head of the household is not a good one. And
Okay.
there's not really a reason to have that, because whether you're working in the home or outside the home, and there's a partnership there, then there's not one that's the head over the other one. They should be equal in the way the household is.
The household
Is run.
runs. Yeah.
I guess, and this is a little bit off, but I did want to bring up, you mentioned about our upbringings. Even though my mother was at home all the time too, she worked early on in the marriage, but she was always home for me and my sister. But she wanted us to be able to have jobs and to be able to support ourselves
Sure.
if we needed to.
Sure.
And I really appreciate that she valued that, and I guess raising daughters, that you wanted them to know, no, you're not just going to go and get
Find
married
somebody
and
and
be
stay
taken care
home.
of.
Right. No, which and I appreciate you saying that, and I think that's important, because I think that's a it's a talking point
Mhm,
that people use to say, like, we're not going back to the kitchen type of expression.
mhm. Right.
And I often say, because this is just my worldview, like, I don't like to embrace extremes. Not the man makes all the money so he makes all the decisions, or women need to be so career minded because all men are terrible and they need to have backup plans every single time. To me, that's extremist rhetoric, because you can't come together when you talk like that.
Mhm.
It's like, well then, because again, it's like you need to come all the way to me, or I got to come all the way to you, but there's no compromise. I would say, because I love nuance, as I say, things to me are always in the gray. So let's say the female partner could totally have her job and be feeling like she's financially contributing to the household to a certain degree. If she values having her children and wants to be present, I think that's great. That's something that I would value personally. That's something I would want. However, I think a traditional masculine example would be that you only work, and when you come home, it's kind of like, leave me alone. I don't talk to nobody, but I make sure we have all this, which I also disagree with. I think we need to be more emotionally available, which I feel like is what you're saying, if I had to summarize that. Number one, for the kids, but also for your partner. Showing that, like, we are doing this together. It's not just I bring in this one big thing, so then I don't need to do anything else. Like, I'm pretty much, my value is financial, and that's all I offer to this relationship, to this family, to this home, which I think you all would agree with me is not true. But I need to make sure that I prioritize bringing those other things too. That's why I talk about having the language, making the time, making sure we're talking about these things. You have like a personal connection with your kids. You prioritize the relationship because you make time. You're not so busy with work. You're like, yeah, I'll talk to her next month, or we'll go on a date like in 6 months. Because then she's gonna feel neglected, or he's gonna feel neglected, and then how do we? It just gets harder and harder to come back from if we keep pushing that up.
And the household chores never go away, whether you're
Right.
you go away to work or you're there all the time. It's 24/7, and it's hard. It's hard for women who are working full time, and the men work full time, but the man comes home and doesn't do anything.
Sure.
It's like,
And
no,
so
everybody
all the
helps.
household
Yes, sir.
duties are left to that woman who, or I don't want to be.
I mean, we can say
Sexist about it.
traditionally it may happen to men. Or sorry,
Right.
it happens to women, but
there
some
are
men
many.
too.
There are many relationships where the partner that stays home is a male, and that's it. It could be the same thing, because it's exhausting,
Yeah,
and it's just not.
it
it's
definitely
just
is.
not
Yeah,
right.
you split chores. And
Yeah.
we both love cooking.
You do.
We love entertaining,
You do.
and we help.
them.
And that's time where, when we're together, we're in the kitchen. We get to talk. It's good time together.
Yep.
Which is different, right? Because I think I would make the case. I think you two found a way to balance that equation, to use kind of like a math example, because you both did work, and yet you still found time to be around your children and still found time to make sure you were cooking for them, and still found time to make sure you were talking to them and bond with them. And obviously over the course of the discussion, also still found time for each other. Right? To me, that I would say, this again, my opinion, that is a recipe for success. That you have to balance all those things, because it can't all fall on one person. I think that's where we kind of get it confused. Like, to me, the balance would be like, if she's doing all the chores, it's probably because she's not really having to work. So like, maybe that's the exchange that they negotiate. That's why I talk again about the intention part. You pre-negotiate that. I'll make a lot of the money so you can be home and be home with the children. So are you going to be comfortable with taking care of majority of the domestic duties? Because I don't want to have to worry about that too much if I'm having to make sure we have everything else going. Okay, cool. Now we're both in agreement. Or it's split. You work full time, you work full time. So who's doing what? Because I'm not doing it all. You're going to do some laundry. You're going to bust some dishes out. Like, how are we going to make this work? Right? We have
Absolutely.
to. Right. So, and again, I know because I saw you guys, like, you guys did it. So I think that's a really good example. And I think sometimes, again, we get caught up in the extreme of, you only want me at home, or I need to be the career-oriented person, and there is no in between.
It's
has to
not
be
beneath
balance.
me to go clean the shower or the toilet. It's like, okay, it needs done. I'll do it.
Right.
It's
But
like,
that just comes down to basically the word for in everything, and in relationship and communication, it's balance.
Right.
and
in
supporting
between.
each other.
Yeah. So
I agree. I think sometimes I don't want to say overuse. I think we underuse that word, actually. But I think sometimes we get the context of that confused, where we feel like, again, it should lean more towards like, let me make sure I'm getting what I need, but I may not always be as considerate of what my partner needs. And so when are we actually sitting down and talking about those things? Like, how do you feel like the relationship is going right now in terms of, I've been gone a lot. I've been really busy. I know I've been at the office really late. Like, how are you feeling? How do you feel about us? I just call them like a check-in, right? To make sure that, again, we still feel like we're on the same course. We still want the same things. But I often find that like we don't do that. And it's like years that go by. And like, this person feels like she's over here, and this guy feels like he's over here. And they're wondering why they like bicker a lot, or they avoid each other a lot. And it's because you guys don't talk about anything.
that's
Like,
a
how-
really good point.
Like, how could you?
Yeah.
You just, and again, we talked about growing and evolving, and you two are growing and evolving, of course, still now. So we have to keep doing these types of check-ins and discussions so that we make sure that we are still happy with where we are. We're still feeling fulfillment in our lives. But I find that a lot of us don't do that. So then again, we just kind of get surprised that we are where we are, or when we feel like we don't know if we can continue anymore. And I'm like, hey man, you can prevent that. You can, if you want to be proactive. Now, a lot of people are too reactionary. So that's why I find that they find themselves in the situations that they're in.
Well, I even found that same issue would go on in a business environment. Because when I was in the MBA program for, I don't know, a year and a half, that the management, by walking around and communicating with people and going from department to department, that a lot of the issues that occurred was because of lack of communication. And it's like, as soon as the channels got opened up, issues went away, and things were much more productive and healthy for everybody.
Yeah. I even if you talk about whether it's business or relationship, to me, I think a lot about appreciation also, and feeling like, because you were talking earlier about kind of like what you contribute. I think for a lot of, again, this is my take, you guys don't have to agree. I think for a lot of guys, I think we act like we don't need a lot of things that we really do want. Like, we know women tend to want validation, and they want to hear that they're appreciated. They're very big into words typically. And guys, we're just kind of like, I'm good. But I think we really do want those things. Maybe we don't feel like we need it as much, but I think every now and then it is nice to hear,
needed.
I appreciate you. I appreciate that you did this. I value you for what you offer to us, to me, to our lives.
Or just thank you for doing that.
Right. General
It might be
acknowledgement.
something little.
Little attaboy,
Yeah.
Right.
attagirl.
I feel like those things matter, because sometimes
do.
I think one another thing I talk about is like complacency. I feel like it's a very, and maybe you guys can touch on this, it's a very natural thing that we have to fight, because when you're with somebody for a while, you can't not get used to them. It's just a function of human behavior. But you have to like fight that desire to get complacent, because then you start, maybe the person feels like they're not appreciated or they're not valued. Like, oh, so you're taking me for granted because I'm always going to be here, right? And you're like, no, I recognize that you're not. I recognize that I want you to be here and that you choose to be here. So how can I maybe demonstrate that to you in a way that you feel that from me? But I don't often hear that. I would like to hear your thoughts on that before I continue.
It's quiet time and personal time is so important. Having time with just her, it's fulfilling, it's rewarding. Planning trips together and doing things together, it's where I find a lot of happiness.
Yeah. You feel the same?
I do.
Okay. No, it's good. You guys are keeping it simple. No, and like I said, I think it's just it's a situation where the greater we are able to effectively communicate with one another, the more likely we're going to get the needs that we have will get them met. But sometimes we either expect that the person, this is a big one, this is why I asked you the question. When we stay together for so long, again, complacency, you feel like the other person should know.
Right.
Should.
You should
being
know
the operative
what I'm
word.
thinking.
You
Yes.
should know. And I push back because I said, I don't care how long you've been together. You're not always going to know. You get used to a person, so you probably know, I'm sure you know things that she likes, you know things that he likes. But he can always surprise you. And she can always surprise you. But, oh, I didn't know you were into that. I didn't know you liked that. So that discourse to me is really important because those things could change.
Right.
But you wouldn't know if you're not talking about it. If you're just like, well, after 10 years, you don't actually have to talk anymore.
Right. Or I don't have to say I love you. He knows I love him.
Right. I mean, you can say that,
But
and I get that,
Right.
but every
Right.
now and then you're probably
And he
like,
does.
no, I do want to
but
hear that.
I do want to say that.
I do want to hear that. And I want to tell you that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to say it.
Yeah. Like, I want to hear that when I come in the door. Like,
Mhm.
made me feel good after a long day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to come home and, if you don't have a dog, to have somebody be happy to see you. Like, we don't have a dog anymore.
Just coming in. I'm so happy.
Jump up on my shoulders and kiss me.
Yeah.
Buster.
Yes. Shout out to dogs. That's where dogs
They do
can help.
fulfill that.
They can. They can. But obviously, it's not exactly the same as
It's
hearing from
not.
your partner.
It's
No,
not.
no.
You still need it from your partner.
Yes, very true. Okay, I'm asking another question. So, and I would say more so recently. You don't need to go back to like in the beginning of the relationship. More so as of recent, over the course of the relationship, what do you feel like you've determined, or maybe discovered, might be a better word, are important characteristics or qualities that you know that you need from him and that you need from her?
The first thing that comes to my mind is gratitude.
Appreciation,
hmm
love.
Yeah, and just I don't know.
Happiness is extremely important.
Yeah, just at little snippets of joy, or when I feel something that's made me joyful, to be able to share it with him, and likewise if he does the same thing.
Right.
Those things that means a lot to me. So it's just a few little things. I don't ask
Okay.
for a whole lot.
Doing the small things though.
It's a small
They matter.
things. They
Yeah.
do. They
Have a
do.
date night.
Right.
Little.
Still do that.
It's just the
it's
little
like, let's get out of here. Let's go have dinner somewhere.
tiny
We've been
little
working too
things.
much, or
Yeah.
projects around the house. It's like, let's get out of here. Let's go have some fun.
I like that. No, and I think that that's important. I only ask because sometimes when I like have these discussions, to give you guys some context, it's very interesting when you hear young people talk about that when I ask that kind of question, because this is my opinion. Some of the things that they value or they think is the most important, I don't think are the most important to actually have the relationship last. I think they could come across sometimes as quite superficial, or let's just say more short-term in thinking.
Mhm.
And when I'm asking that question, I'm thinking, that's why I asked you guys to reflect on the entirety of your relationship. I'm looking for the long term, because obviously you guys have made it long term. So many of us would hope to have a relationship even as long as you have had now, and you guys are still going. So being able to understand and appreciate those things, the small things, and again, choosing each other, I think is really important for us to remember if you're going to be in the relationship. Because as I always like to know, relationships are voluntary. Marriages are voluntary. You don't got to be there. You choose to be there. Hopefully you don't feel obligated and that's the only reason that you're staying, because I suspect you're probably going to be miserable if that's the
Yeah, don't
the
have
right
children. Just try to
choose.
keep your marriage alive.
Right. Right. Because that
ain't
ain't going to get it done.
That's not going to work.
No, sir. And so being able to understand that and recognize, no, again, before even we talk about kids, before kids, it was us. So we should always be the most important. That's not disrespectful to say to your kids.
No.
It's just like, hey, but in order to have you, we had to be solid. We had to want the same things already. So yeah, we're more important than you. Sorry. You got to just accept that. I don't think that's weird to say, but I think some people feel that kids should always be like they're the top priority always, and I beg to differ. I think they're just an aspect of you. Like I said earlier, they're not all of you. Anyway, I don't want to get on soapbox on that. So let's talk about something a little bit more challenging though, in terms of navigating, let's say, different problems, different challenges that you guys have faced throughout the relationship. How do you feel like you have approached problem solving throughout the entirety of your relationship?
It's called communicating and talking and bringing stuff up. And
Yeah, but that's not to say it hasn't just been easy. It's not just a cakewalk.
Right.
There have been things that have come up that were stressful, and you're just not sure how everything's going to end up, and there's a bit of anxiety from time to time.
Actually, let me ask you a follow-up. Has there ever been a time where maybe one of you wanted to talk about something, but you felt really uncomfortable because you didn't know how the other one was going to respond?
I can't think of anything along that lines.
No. So generally, if something did happen, the more often than not, the approach would be, we're going to sit down. One of us is going to let the other know, we would like to talk about this. We're going to sit down. We're going to work through it. And more or less since the beginning of the relationship, that's how you guys have been.
I think more so now. I think it was a little bit hard at the beginning to sit down and talk about things, and that was partly my fault. I'll say that right now.
Okay. And I appreciate you saying that, because I also know that a lot of people who are in these type of relationships, it can be exactly like you guys are, where one person is more open and the other person may not be. So you're exactly what you did is helping the other person learn to be open, or feel like it's safe enough to be open, to actually share with me the things that you're nervous about, you're afraid of, you're worried about, so that we can actually do something with it.
Yep.
But I've seen a lot of situations, like I said earlier, a lot of folks don't do that. Like, they may have an impression that it shouldn't be that difficult, that somehow life is going to respect your relationship or respect your marriage in such a way that it won't give you anything that you can't handle. And I know from my experiences that that's not true. A lot of things will be thrown at you: death of a loved one, losing your job, financial challenges that sometimes really devastate couples and families. That they happen. But somehow we must find a way then to remember that we chose to do this together, though, and not think that doing this solo is a better option. But how do we fight that feeling to not bail and say no, but as hard as this is, I know I still would rather do this with you, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, your first thought might be, I'll just bail, but I have to speak for me. I would just have to rethink it, and I would need time to process it. Some people might have that first thought, I'm just going to bail on this, and then they're gone.
Right.
but it takes working together. It takes two to get you there, and it takes two to let it go too.
Right. Do you guys remember, and you can take it however you want to, but I'm just curious, do you remember any like really specific issue that was like really hard for you two to overcome, like throughout the duration of the relationship?
I do. For me, it was when we moved here to Florida, and
1,000 miles away from
it was
family.
hard. I'd never been that far away from family, and I left all my family, all my friends, my job that I loved.
She
and
was a couple years from vesting in
right,
Parkview Hospital in Fort Wayne.
then coming here.
Start over.
And I started over, and I didn't know anyone, and he was working probably 60 or 70 hours a week, and
It was worse than public accounting.
it was a really hard time.
Yeah.
It really was. I did a couple of times have some thoughts of packing up and leaving, but I knew I just couldn't. I wouldn't. And we stuck with it, and finally things did improve, but it was hard.
Yeah.
It was really a hard time. Yeah, that was. And I don't know about you. I mean, it was probably just as hard or harder on you because you were the one living at the office all the time.
It was goofy.
But anyway, it was one of those rough things that we had to get through, and that was really hard.
And then even when, like, I'm curious, like, even when you wanted her to come, like, what was that conversation like? It was just, I got this job, I'm moving to Florida, come
No,
with,
it was,
or?
No, it was. I knew the region office was getting dissolved up in Fort Wayne at Cox Cable, and that I was actually already looking for another job in Fort Wayne because they were in the process of moving the region office to Chicago, and I wasn't about to raise our children in the outskirts of Chicago or downtown Chicago, and it's like no. And then someone threw out the opportunity that there was going to be an opening in Gainesville, and obviously being in accounting and a CPA, having a chance to have full standalone accounting and oversee it, set everything up. And that option really intrigued me, and we came down here and I interviewed, was offered the job, we talked about it, and then it was really weird because within 7 days of the house hunting trip down here, we sold our house in Fort Wayne, we bought a house down here, and she found a job at Chance. And it was like, wow, this
Everything
meant to
everything
be.
happening very, very
It was
quickly.
like,
Okay.
But it was never
was-
never that he said, well,
we're going.
I've got
I'm
this
going.
job, we're
You're
going.
coming with me.
No,
right. It's like,
it was, we talked
should we
about
do
it.
it?
We'd just been to Florida on a vacation.
It was
We
actually
were like,
a Bowers family
yeah,
reunion down in
let's-
Orlando.
yeah, let's go to
And
Florida.
we're like, okay, well, I could stay in Cox
I could
in
live
the region,
there.
and they'll place me somewhere like Spokane, Washington, or Lubbock, Texas, or all these places around the country if I stayed until all the cable systems were sold off, or I could jump ship sooner rather than later. And,
Right.
and we're like, okay, well, people vacation in Florida, family, friends, better chance of staying together and staying in touch being down here than Lubbock, Texas. It's like it was going to go visit us there, and
That's a fair
so
point.
we made the jump. We've enjoyed being here since
And yeah, it was
1985.
it ends up, it was a good move. It was just it was a hard
First year or
transition
so.
for me.
I mean, that makes sense, though. Like you said, you left basically everything you knew with the exception of him. So you just
Yep.
resetting, trying to reintegrate into a new
And
environment.
then when our first son came along, you don't have any grandma and grandpas nearby
Yeah,
to
but they
help take care of.
they helped. Everything
Everything worked out.
worked out. Yeah.
It's like we're in this together.
Right. Which is why I think that to me is a big reason why I think you all have been able to find the level of balance that you have, is because you don't forget that it's about us together,
Mhm.
right? It's never just like I'm driving everything, so like come along
No.
with me as I'm driving
Mhm.
this train,
Yeah,
so
no.
to speak. What do we want to do? This is the option.
Yeah,
this
do
is
we
the
wanna-
opportunity in front of us. Like, how do we
Do
want to
wanna
handle
do this or not?
Mhm.
Right.
So yeah, we just decided to go for it. So
And obviously you made it here, and you've been here
We
for
did.
quite some time.
Yes, very happy here.
Okay, all right. Now we're gonna get to kids, because we've obviously been talking around this for a long time. So first question: was the first child, was he planned?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because I remember you said that it had been some while, because you said what, 7 years after
7 years.
marriage, and
Mhm.
you were just like living
Mhm.
life, getting to know each other,
Mhm.
enjoying each other.
Yes.
Fair to say? Okay.
Now it's
So-
time to start a family.
Mhm.
Right. Okay.
And we knew if we were going to have multiple children, they needed to be within a few years of each other so they could grow up and be
Well,
friends.
we knew, well, that's what we wanted.
Right.
We didn't, that was just our desire.
Sure.
Yes,
To
indeed.
try to make them close, which
Mhm.
obviously you were successful in.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then that happens, and then did you both know for sure, like, we wanted two? Was there an idea to have more, or
No, we
just
knew
like, we're gonna stop here?
we knew we wanted to.
Stop it too.
That was always a discussion we had, that
Okay.
2 was going to be
Enough.
enough.
Okay.
And desire. That was our desire.
Okay.
Yeah.
And no, obviously we don't get to choose this, but no emphasis on having a girl, or just like whatever we get is whatever
Nope.
we get.
No,
Yep.
we just want to make sure
Yep.
everybody's healthy, all fingers functioning, and
Yep.
we have no qualms. But I know whenever we mentioned it to my dad, what are you going to name him? Well, Dad,
Yeah.
we don't know. It could be a boy or a girl. What are you going to name him?
Because there are a lot of
he was
boys
set
in
on
this
that.
family.
Bowers
yeah.
breed boys.
Yeah. Anyway.
Which is more of, clearly, still. So
Yep.
Yes.
okay. Now, when you guys had that conversation, was it both clear at that time, or whenever you guys were talking about it, that you both wanted to, or was there any convincing for one of you, like, I only want one?
No, there was no convincing. We
Okay.
both knew we wanted to.
Okay. And I think that's good. I only asked again because I know for some couples, like, they don't talk about that before they even get in a relationship.
Like
let
how
alone get
they know
married.
they want kids, but not how many.
Right.
That kind
And
of-
not that that's necessarily a deal breaker, but it can be challenging, right? If somebody's like, I want one, and this one's like, I want three.
Mhm.
I mean, you might say, okay, we'll split the difference and we'll do two, but everybody's not always willing to compromise, as you
Mhm.
two have been. So I just think it's important. Like, those are, to me, important conversations that should be had earlier.
Mhm.
Right. But I know a lot of
Yes,
people,
absolutely.
they don't always do that. And then they may wait too long again, and then develop a level of connection with this person, and then be saddened that this person doesn't want what they want. And then they end up getting more hurt when it inevitably may not work out. So I think it's great that you two, number one, spent a good amount of time dating, then got married, then spent what some people may say a long time. I think is great. 7 years to just really do each other and get to know each other and enjoy
And get
that type of
The goal
relationship.
was to get financially set, get college loans behind us, get a handle so that we would have a house
Right.
and not try to be raising children in an apartment, which we could, but we decided we didn't want to do that.
That was
and
the
it's
plan.
like that setting aside money to try to do that, and we had a plan.
Right.
It wasn't not thought out. We had a plan.
Right.
And like even moving here from Fort Wayne, when we were house hunting, we were doing it based on my salary only, so that if for some reason we did have children and she had to stay home, because
You know you could do it,
we knew we would not be just overstretched and have to go relocate or sell.
which is good strategy. That's very good strategy.
But that's something that we did back in 1985.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Wait, were you still 23 when you had that conversation? Or was that a little bit older? That
That,
specific
That
one
was-
about
that was older.
That was
Older.
six, yeah,
Yeah.
older.
Okay.
I'd say 5 years into the
Yeah.
marriage.
Oh, okay. So like maybe 28-ish. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. Even just the strategy, like hearing you talk that out loud. Like, that's always how I think about things. It's like, well, you need to be strategic on making sure it's going to work for all parties. So like, if this doesn't work, then what are we going to do? Kind of like, what do you call it? Fail safing yourself?
Well, we had a fixer-upper in Fort Wayne that we bought for our first house, and I knew what it was going to take to come into this job here. It's like, I know I don't need to be having a house that needs to be revamped and redone, and it's like we need to get something that's ready to be moved in and
Mm-hmm.
relatively new. And we found a home that was like a year old,
Mhm.
and we got it for what we wanted it. So
So in that regard, it all worked out the way you wanted.
Yep.
Okay. And then, since you all have older children now, I want to ask about like how has that transition been for you from obviously raising kids to what's the term, empty nesters?
Mhm.
That's
They're
been a
just
great
having
joy.
life post children being young children. How would you describe like how life feels like for you now?
It's fine. I mean, I sometimes miss all those days of the kids being here, but
Sure.
sometimes I don't.
And the fun and,
I can imagine.
So
and
yeah,
the, and the
so
camp outs and
we've it's kind of carefree. I mean, we just say, hey, do you want to go over to St. Augustine this weekend, or do you want to go do this or that? And you don't have to make plans. And I mean,
So and so going over to this
Or-
person's
yeah,
house.
right. So no,
or we get a
it's
call.
nice.
It's like, we need you here at the house tomorrow. Can you be here? Yep. Just
Oh.
drop what we're doing and
oh,
go
with
take care
with
of the grandkids.
Yeah.
We need to.
We love to
love
be
to.
able to do that. Yeah.
help our kids.
Yeah. I think that's, you know, obviously something I'm looking forward to when that time comes. But I know it's also, I think, hard for a lot of us too, just knowing when you put in a lot of effort to,
Mhm.
you know, to these little people, and you see what comes out,
Yeah.
what they turn into.
Yeah. But I mean, when you're so used to having the children around too, it almost seems like, oh, that's going to be so lonely when they're not there.
I would agree if your children are your whole world.
Right.
Then yeah, it would. Which
Yeah.
is not what
But
you
just
two
not
said.
what we
Right.
have, because we've always had each other.
Correct.
Mhm.
And that's what I meant earlier when I said, like, that's why to me those roles matter, and understanding the value of each. So if I understand from 0 to 18, not that you don't care about your kids after they're 18, but this is like when I'm responsible for you.
Mhm.
Anything after that is like, or this is just how I kind of make the sense in my mind. If we've developed a good relationship, if I've cultivated intentionally a good relationship, you'll want to come around, you'll want to share with me, you'll want to talk with me, you may want to ask my opinion about stuff, right? Because I can't tell you what to do. But you may want to hear my opinion because you respect what I think, both of you. But if I haven't done that, then it might feel more lonely because then they're not around and they're not talking to you as much, and then maybe you don't get to have the type of relationship that you want. And if I was so focused on my kids that I was neglecting my relationship with my partner, it might feel double lonely because now you guys are gone. We're not able to be as connected as I would like to be, and we don't really do a whole lot
Mhm.
together, or even
Right.
individually. So it's like,
Right.
I really feel sad.
Yeah.
Or I really feel lonely.
Yeah.
That could be the outcome. Easy.
That
Right.
can happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Which again, you guys did not do,
Correct.
which is great. And I think that's a good example, again, for all of us to remember that. It's important to value the children in the time that we, I would say, get the privilege to raise them.
Mhm. And
But we
it
know,
was.
but we know that there's an end date in that regard, that traditional sense. And you need to have other things going on in life.
Mhm.
Like there's still other things to value, to appreciate. If you're fortunate enough to have a relationship like you two, don't forget to value and appreciate each other, and choose each other continuously,
Yeah.
to have the kind of longevity that you two have had.
Yeah. And I like I say, I miss them, but I also wanted them. I wanted them to be independent. I'm
Right.
happy that they have their lives and they're happy. That's
Right.
very.
And they're seeing the joy that we saw when we had children.
Yeah.
That
Right.
they have children.
Yeah.
Right. I agree. That to me is, again, obviously you know better than me, but that's kind of like I foreshadow to myself that I know will be difficult, you know, in terms of like letting go in that sense, but necessary,
Mhm.
very necessary, and it's not a bad thing.
Not at all.
For that time to happen. I hope that we, and myself, we do a good enough job that, again, they value what we think, and they want to hear, they want us to still be very involved. Maybe not to the same degree, of course, when they're in school, but they want us to still be very present in their lives. So anyways, all right. So that's pretty much most of the main topics I wanted to touch on, but the last thing I wanted to touch on, and I wanted to give you guys more of the floor just to speak openly. You two have the experience, right? There's a lot of things that some of us may not think about, or we may be considering in terms of what to expect when you getting into this type of relationship and marriage. If you were looking back at yourself, back when you were 23, back when you were 19, you were 20, maybe before you even met. What's something that you think that we should know, or you would have wanted yourself to know at that time, to try to help us get the type of outcome that you two have clearly got? Feel free to take some time to ponder.
Okay.
No pressure.
Well, I know when we first got married, my father was in insurance. And of course, I had a life insurance policy that they bought in case something happened. But it was like, okay, does Sharon have insurance? So we went and upped our life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously when we started having children, my father was like, okay, well, have you started any kind of a disability policy in case you're in a car accident, fully disabled? So do you have short-term, long-term insurance? Things that, a lot of people, I don't need any of that.
Family stability,
But
though.
Stability.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, one of the things that we've always done is talk about finances together, investments, things that I know she didn't study in school. I did, but that the long-term benefit of starting at a very young age, saving for retirement, saving when the kids were first born,
Right.
start saving for college day one, every month, setting aside something to help pay for college. And then whenever I was very fortunate and got incentives from my employer, that those things got set aside into either IRAs or education IRAs that took care of that stuff instead of going and blowing it on a car or vacation or whatever. It's like, no, we want to do this for the long haul.
Right.
But and looking at what we do with everything that we have,
Right.
and it's looking. I would always suggest people that use something like Quicken software so you can keep track of what's coming and going. You can kind of share it together.
I think that's really important.
You got a roadmap.
Yeah. I mean, because we were talking about earlier, like financial challenges can sometimes be the devastation of a relationship or a family, let alone. So, and I think sometimes we don't take that seriously, to your point, in terms of planning ahead, particularly if we want kids. Planning for their future, planning for a future, whether one of us are not here or both of us. So I do think that those things are important to make sure that we're actively discussing and that we're on the same page about, and we got plans
And if you
how
say,
we want it to play out.
Yeah, it's like when you first get started in marriage, do you have an emergency fund, or do you have, if you buy a house, having financial resources to take care of repairs or things that can come up.
Right.
It's talking about it and putting a plan in motion to try to get there.
Right.
But also setting aside money for vacations and those times, the getaways that we would have. And grandma and grandpa would take care of the kids and we'd go take care of ourselves, even if it was only 3 or 4 nights away in the Bahamas or whatever. That's where I got my sailing itch.
No, that makes sense though. I mean, still, again, making that time, even you said put the money away to
and
keep choosing each other.
Yep. Planning together.
What do you think?
Well, mine is kind of more on an emotional as opposed to
I think his last
financial.
one was. I think his last one was.
Yes.
That one-on-one time, the getaways.
Yes, the one-on-one is great.
I think so.
We also, I wanted someone who would care for me, and that I could care for him, like in sickness or and emotionally, just someone that I would cherish and they cherish me. And knowing, it's hard knowing who that person might be, that it's going to last a long lifetime.
Sure.
It's scary. That's why it's really important to get to know the person too.
Right.
And trusting and loving and
trust. And then just to know that your physical needs will be taken care of too. I had foot surgery, I think about 5 years ago, and Paul took such good care of me. It was just, I'd never seen that side of him really, and after all these years, but it was amazing. And it's important to get to know that person, that they'll take care of the things, your needs.
They'll be there for
Right.
you.
Right.
And also it was important to me to not be just a couple all the time, but we have friends that we like to do things with, and so socially to be able to do things together as couples or with just friends, that's important to me. I kind of looked at that too.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, being able to, I would say sometimes being able to socialize outside of one another, outside of the
Yes.
relationship,
yeah.
but then also doing things
Also-
together.
Also
And-
together, both, a
Right.
little bit of both.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't lose that sense of identity,
Right.
because we talk about also like if the relationship is my primary identity, then that can develop codependency. Like I don't know who I am outside of us.
Right. Yeah.
So being able to do those things that are important for me, but then also, but I value us, so we need to keep again working on us. And then obviously, if we have children, then we as a unit need to go do stuff together, so we're all bonding. No, I love that last thing that you said too. It's when you talked about like being able to have that support, right? Especially when you go through hard times. I want to go back to the beginning when I was talking about how life is really hard for everybody, right? Some of us get it worse than others, depending on how you want to look at it, but it's hard overall, right? I think in general, when you talked about who could that person be, right? I'm of the mind, maybe you two might agree. My opinion is I don't think there's really soulmates. I think there's people that you could work with. It depends on how confident and comfortable you are in yourself and know what you need, and that person is in themselves. You articulate, express those things to each other, you mirror and want the same things. I believe it could work. I don't think there's one person on the planet that you can do that. I think there's a ton of people you could probably do it with. The question is, are you going to put that level of intention in to actually create that with that person? But my whole reason in saying that is I don't think life is meant to be lived alone. That's my point of making that comment. I think because life is so hard, you really appreciate that other person precisely because of what you just said.
Well, to be able to come home after a rough day at work, or
Talk
something
about,
goes
have
wrong,
somebody to talk
or
about.
they would lose a baby in the NICU, and she'd be in tears, and because they save so many,
Sure.
but then there's some that can't be saved, and to have someone to talk to work through that. Where I have issues at my work and I need to come home and talk with her.
Right.
It's like, help me here.
I agree.
Good sounding board, and it's healthy.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't keep problems welled up inside. Talk about it.
Yes, sir.
Get it out in the open and
Wish I had
Move
a
on.
an air horn. I'd blow it for you right
Move
now. You speaking my language. I'm literally saying this all the time, trying to convince all of us to adopt that type of idea. And but yeah, just I think to me one of the best things about you two is just the level of support. I think it's truly admirable to see and then hear the way you describe each other and how you're there for each other and how you want to be there for each other continuously. And I think that many of us want that, but I think sometimes we're not always willing to put in the work to create that, right? I don't think you guys got up
it's not a cakewalk.
when you were 23 and you were like, oh, I know, as much as I feel for her, as much as I feel for him, I know she's going to do this for me forever. I know he's going to be this way forever. It's growing over time and seeing like, he does this. Oh, she does that. She listens to me. He listens to me. He does that. She does that. And then that confidence and that comfort rises over time. That security increases over time. And you're like, yeah, of course I can build with this person. Like, look at all the stuff we've dealt with already. And look at how it's continuing to evolve more and more over time. Like, yeah, we can go as long as we choose to go. Is that fair for me to make that point?
Yeah, it's some big things. There's big things, but once again, we said before, it's little things. It's lots of little things, and then a lot of big things thrown in too.
Right.
But it's really more the little things that really seal that relationship.
Anything you want to add to that, or did she do a good?
She did a good
cap
job.
that off. Anything else you think we should know, or any other general piece of guidance that you would like us to know, for those of us that would like to at some point emulate what you two have? Anything at all? Or anything that wasn't already mentioned?
I can't think of anything that we haven't already talked about.
Okay.
Me neither.
Okay. Well, that's the end of my questions. So, to reiterate, and I mean this, I appreciate you all immensely for sharing all of the things that you have. I think so many of us can gain a lot of valuable insight and perspective. I'm sure I will go back and listen to this several times, because it's different when I usually kind of make this point. It's different when you think you know something, and it's very different when you've lived that experience. It's like theoretical versus practical. You guys have lived the practical. Like whatever we think we know about relationships, we may have some good ideas, right? And I've tried to share some of them with you all today. But you all know what works because you've done it for 49 years, excuse me. 44 years. I'm sorry. But you found a way to make that work. And I hope that this is a beautiful example for those out there that might have been like me and may not have had that really in your face example that you felt you would subscribe to, because you two are that for me. And so I hope that anybody who may have listened or watched this and they see that, I hope that they not necessarily use you all as the example, but listen to a lot of the things that you have shared of how it can work, right? There's a lot of ways, I think, to come together to make a relationship work, but there's some fundamental stuff that you two said that doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is, you got to do it if you want what you two have. And I think majority of us out there, if you broke down all the other stuff, all the noise, this is what we want. So again, I appreciate you all for putting all this out here. And for me, it has always been a privilege to know you two and everything that you've been able to add to me.
Well, thank you.
I've been able to put a lot of things in perspective, and I'm generally grateful because I know that everybody doesn't have that opportunity. So I hope you guys know that. And I hope that anybody out there that listens to this and watches this, I hope you appreciate this discussion, because I don't think enough of us actually are talking about these things in today's society. And so please consider liking and subscribing and following a lot of this information and these types of interviews that I'm doing, because it takes a lot of effort to make this stuff. But let me tell you, it's a privilege whenever I'm able to have these types of discussions with lovely people like you, because I think there's so much valuable knowledge and wisdom, but we don't talk about it. So then younger folks like myself and people younger than me don't get to learn from that insight. So again, thank you for saying all of that. Until next time, we're going to sign off. So peace out, guys.